Hi everyone, welcome back to the Norfolk Southern Cedartown District in HO scale. A couple weeks ago I posted a video showing my limestone train, which consists of NSC 2400 open hoppers that were all 3D printed. And when I posted that video I said I'd follow up with some video on how I did that. So I'll walk through all the steps of going from a CAD design to printing to painting to the final finishing and putting them out and running them on the layout. So first we'll get started with just a video or two showing the train running around the layout. We'll follow it from Cedartown down to Carrollton. Then I'll do a close-up shot of one of the cars and talk about some of the details for that, and then I'll show some still images and some video screen captures showing the CAD process and the 3D printing and finishing process. We start our chase of 68W off at Cedartown, where crews from the Atlanta North End swap out with Cedartown District crews. 68W, which has SD70 2539 leading, is holding the main line, while Coltrane 724 is tied down on the siding, also awaiting a Cedartown District crew. Next, we'll see 68W passing Blossman Gas at Buckhannon. On the north side of Carrollton, we see 68W passing SLM Recycling. We catch our final view of 68W crossing the US 27 overpass at the north end of the Carrollton yard. 68W is almost to its destination at Georgia Power's Plant Wansley, which is on the south side of Carrollton. Now we'll take a closer look at one of these limestone hoppers. In total, I printed 17 of these. So I've got them all in this single train here. As I said, all of these were 3D printed. I did the 3D printing using two different resins. I used Loctite Onyx Pro 410 for some of the cars and Soraya Tech Build for some of the other cars. Everything on the cars except the loads, the trucks, the couplers are 3D printed. The loads are actually crushed up limestone. I found this in a bag at Lowe's and I sifted it down using a kitchen sifter to get realistic rock sizes to go in the cars. The trucks mount on the body using little 2-56 screws. One of the benefits of the Soraya and the Loctite resins that I used is that it's a pretty tough resin that's pretty easy to tap using a 2-56 tap. All the various details on the car, the air reservoirs, the handbrake, the ladders, those are all printed as well. All the decals came from Fusion Scale, so most of them, like the car number, the data, those were all custom designed. I drew them up in Corel Draw and sent them off to Fusion Scale for printing. All the reflective striping is also from Fusion Scale. The paint used on the cars was Tamiya. It's a mix of white with a few drops of the Tamiya Deck Tan in there. And that's the main body color. Then there was some light weathering applied, particularly down around the underframes where these cars collected a fair amount of dirt and dust. That was done using my typical weathering mix, which is a very thin mix of Tamiya brown, gray, and tan. Hi everyone, we've moved over to the computer now so I can show you some of the CAD files and the decal drawing files, as well as some prototype pictures of these limestone trains. So this is the 3D CAD model that covers pretty much all of the body of the hoppers. Doesn't include the coupler box covers on there or the brake wheel. Those are in separate files and were printed separately. Same thing with all the stirrups. This is the main body file. All of this design work was done in Solid Edge, which is an excellent CAD program. It's one I've used at work and I learned in my undergrad classes. So I did all the 3D design work for this in Solid Edge. Lots and lots of detail in this car, all based on photos and measurements from the real thing. There are some areas that had to be a little beefed up to print properly, particularly the end cages on here. Had a lot of issues with those warping and just not printing properly, so they're a fair bit thicker than scale, but I think they ended up looking all right. Again, like I said, lots of detail on here, things like the door actuators on the underframe, various parts of the brake detail. All right, so here's the file loaded up in T2 box. As you can see, I printed it pretty much flat and parallel with the build plate. I worked through various orientations and attempts at printing these, and ultimately this ended up giving me the best results as far as preventing warping of the
end cages went. So another benefit to printing of this blade is that I was able to get 2 of them on the build plate at once, considering how long these take to print and how slow the exposure times for either Soraya build or the Loctite Onyx are. This was very helpful for reducing the amount of time. Putting all the supports on the bottom also really shortened the cleanup work as well. So it meant I really only had to do some sanding and filing to the bottom so there weren't support marks all over most of the body of these. We'll flip over to Adobe Reader now, and I'll show you the file that I sent off to Fusion Scale for printing. All of this was done in Corel Draw for making the decals, which is a really great program. This was my first time using it to make decals, and I was very satisfied with how it worked. So I would highly recommend that. I'd also highly recommend using Fusion Scale for printing any custom decals. The decals came back really high quality. They slid right off the decal paper and onto the model very smoothly. They didn't really wrinkle up or leave much of a film. They're slivering on the model. Fusion Scale was really great to work with as well. I sent these files off to them. They gave me excellent feedback on some minor changes that I needed to make to ensure they got the best print quality possible. And I had the decals in hand less than a week after I sent them the file originally. So again, highly recommend working with Fusion Scale if you ever need custom decals done.
Hi everyone, we've moved out of the garage now, so please excuse the mess, but I did want to give a brief view of what my 3D printing, washing, curing, and painting setup looks like. So right now we're looking at my printer setup. I use a Elegoo Saturn S, which is a medium-sized printer, but it's about the perfect size for doing most of the HO scale stuff that I need it to. I keep it inside a plant growing tent, and I've got a heater in there. That lets me print during the winter and keep the temperature of the printer up around 80 to 85 degrees so that the resin is not so viscous and I don't get so many failures from my prints doing that. Moving the flap on the tent over. Here I've got the Elegoo wash and curing station. Those are both incredibly useful tools. The washing is so much easier to have most of it done automatically, and then the curing station, I stick everything in a little bucket of water that I've got sitting on top of it and cure it in there. That helps ensure that everything cures nice and evenly, and it helps prevent warping, which is an issue that I had a lot on these cars, particularly with the end cages and the handrails. Ultimately, by experimenting with the resin I was using, changing around some of the print parameters, and ultimately curing them in that little bucket of water, I was able to get pretty much all the warping out of them. Finally, I do my painting in this little paint booth here. This is just a Vivo home one that I bought off of Amazon pretty cheaply, but it's got, a light, a fan. Works really nicely. I set things on the little turntable in there, so I can spin it around and get good access to all the sides of them. Nothing too fancy about my painting setup. I just use a basic Pache H airbrush connected to a garage air compressor with a couple regulators and moisture traps in line. Being down here in Alabama, those moisture traps are absolutely necessary. Make sure that no water or humidity from the air gets in the paint.
So now we'll take a look at a few prototype photos of these limestone trains on the Cedartown District. Here we see a northbound 69W pulling into Cedartown with the Lackawanna Heritage Unit leading. These trains would pretty commonly end up with just a single locomotive when they were running back north empty, and this day was no exception. Included this picture is this is a 68W. You just can't see any of the limestone cars with it, but I wanted to include the picture showing one of these ST70s leading one of these limestone trains. I chose to let my model a 2539 lead because it reminded me of this photo that I took at Cedartown of one of the NSSD70s with the chipping and fading and peeling paint leading. Here's a photo of another northbound 69W. This one did have 3 locomotives on it. This is on the north side of Cedartown. So they've swapped to an Atlanta North End crew at this point. Final photo of a 68W that I'll share is this one with a UP SD70M leading. This is on the south side of Cedartown. The signal off to the side there is the advanced approach signal for the diamond with the CSX in town.
Overall, I'm very pleased with the way this train turned out. These limestone trains were common fixtures on the Cedartown District during the years that Georgia Power's Plant Wansley and Plant Yates were open, and I photographed a number of the prototype trains over the years. Based on my experience seeing these, I determined it was an essential part of the operating scheme on my Cedartown District layout. So that was really made it worth all the effort that it took to get these modeled. So thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please click the like button below and subscribe. And we'll see you again soon. Thank you.